So, but we really don't know. I know there were some giants found in a western state. I can't say where, but there were 2 or 3 of them dug up recently, and we know there weren't Indians because of the artifacts with them. And I didn't see the stuff. I really don't know much about it, but I know that the tribe that dug them up said they knew they weren't Indians, and they would have to be the artifacts, possibly the armor, or something else. Uh, as far as we know, the giant men that inhabited America, at least, were pretty much using metal. We just don't know a lot about them, though.
Hmm. I think what we really have to probably do, if that's the case, is just rely on some of the biblical references. Like I know that I was reading the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 3, verses 4, 5, and 11, and they're talking about the kingdom of Og in Bashan.
Hmm.
And what was really striking about it was when you looked at the size of his bed. I think his bed was like 18 feet plus long by 8 feet wide, based on the conversion of the sizes that they gave in the Bible.
Hmm.
So that's pretty big right there. And I think according to the Bible that the giants actually got smaller as they reproduced, because I don't think the strain was as strong from like the first generation. Because if you look at Joshua, when Joshua was alive and he went down to the promised land, like when I read Numbers 13:33 before, it said that we were like grasshoppers. So I
Hmm.
was on your website and I noticed a picture of you and your grandson, and it looked like the giant that you guys were taking the picture with. I think I could see like the femur bone, and this guy looked like he was over 12 feet tall.
Yeah, that is that's a sculpture I did based on a news article on a newsletter. This road construction engineer from Egypt and Uran Zora was just writing in this Christian newspaper saying that, we dug in the hills over there and we'd uncover these giant skeletons. And, of course, most of them were destroyed or crumbled or, were pot hunted kind of a deal. But they measured one femur, and it would be 47 inches long. So if you blow up a human skeleton to fit that femur, it's a man that his rib cage comes at about 9 feet, bottom of his rib cage. So he's certainly 14 feet, probably more like 16 feet, maybe even taller. And he would be about the size of King Og, probably. May have been
Hmm.
some of those same people. But King Og's bed, you have to keep in mind, even 100 years ago, back when there was no central heating in the homes, if you had a fireplace in your house to cook on and heat things up, a lot of people would heat up rocks by the fireplace and put them in a basket or a leather bag or something and place those at the foot of the bed so you could hang your feet over the bed to keep them warm so you wouldn't get a cold. So when
Hmm.
it's talking about King Og's bed, however the dimensions work out on that, it's a good chance that he was actually another foot or two longer, and that he hung his feet over the edge of the bed over a thing of hot rocks, to keep his feet warm. So, I mean, he may have been even taller than that. But the femur we have here, that's they found several of those, and I think there probably some of those were in stone sarcophaguses.
Hmm.
Uh, and I've heard of a lot of other giants that were buried in stone caskets 12 feet long, beautifully finished, out of granite, some of them. And they had technology that we don't really understand, had the ability to work stone we don't really understand. But there was some
Yeah, I've
mighty,
seen
mighty
some
big
of
people.
the stone like monoliths that they have. I forgot the area where it's actually at, but there's like a group of people standing in front of this like cut like a rectangle, but it's like incredibly huge. And there's a lot of writers out there today like Patrick Heron, who believes that, like the pyramids and a lot of these great monoliths that you see now were actually built by the giants. It wasn't a horde of Hebrew slaves building the Great Pyramid. It was actually giants.
Hmm. Well, you probably know that Hislop in his book Two Babylons says that Nimrod, who also was a giant at 8 feet, hired the Cyclops, the giants, the Cyclopsian giants, to build the ziggurat. Now, we don't know how big they were, but they didn't have one eye socket. They had 2 eye sockets. But the reason they're Cyclops, they have that the religion kind of like Hinduism, where you have the third eye between your eyes, above in your forehead.
Right, like
You know
where
that.
the pineal gland is.
Yeah, and it's kind of like when E.T. in the movie E.T. the E.T. points the finger at the little boy's head and says, "I'll be right here." It's kind of like Jesus saying, "I'll be, let the mind of Christ be in you." And that's what they're trying to affect. But I think that's what the Cyclops were. But apparently, according to Hislop, Nimrod hired them to build the ziggurat, and they could have built some of those temples. There are stones over there in, I believe, Jordan and other places that are so big that you just can't. I don't know. There's machinery today that can even move them, and they've been moved. Same way in Peru. There are stones down there, thousands of them, that are so big you can't move them today, and they're sitting on even bigger ones, and they all came from a mile away down a valley and up a hill, and they're granite.
So these stones were basically like Lincoln logs for the giants.
Well, maybe so, or, you get 10 of these guys on a stone that weighs 60,000 pounds, and maybe they could just get ropes and stuff around it and move it. Maybe it didn't take them all day to finish it. If the stone came up to their chest, it'd be like 4 or 5 of us getting on a stone, making a stone that's 6 feet high. It wouldn't be so daunting. So if you got guys that are 15, 20 feet tall, and they're working on a stone that's 15 or 20 feet tall, it's not so daunting to them. It does help explain some of those huge monolithic edifices that we're not sure how they did it. We're not sure that the Inca people, as we know them, made some of those things. We're not sure they didn't. Apparently they did. But there's also evidence that there were giants among them.
There's a lot of Indian tales, like from the Hopi and the Cherokee and the Iroquois, about the giants that used to live in the land, and they'd pass it down from generation to generation.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's nothing new to them, but this seems to me like giant human evidence is like clearly like left out. I mean, how does this affect the theory of evolution and Darwinism?
Well, it messes up the theory of evolution, because you've always got that little silly lineup of monkey to man, like the 6 feet tall men we are today are the best it's ever been, and you can't explain a man like Goliath and his brothers and these other giants the Bible mentions that had 6 toes, 6 fingers, 2 rows of front teeth. The Bible doesn't say that, but other reports do. And doing all these exploits and these giant edifices and things, that just doesn't fit in there with, the little lineup. They want man to basically still be trying to learn to speak when the mammoths come around. It's just ridiculous.
But what about Darwinism falls under that as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah, Darwin, I don't know what he thought about giants. If anything, now they've dug up a lot of giants in Europe. I'm not so sure how many in England, but I know in Italy, even recently they've been digging up, 8-foot tall women and stuff. And there are many over there in France, other places that are really, really big. So he's had to have known something about them. But there are some. I know of one in Germany. There's a monastery this paleontologist was telling me about, that they had a painting of a big leg bone there, and of a giant. And he's smiling. And I said, "What was it, a mammoth bone?" Yes, he says. And I said, "Well, they weren't all mammoths." And he didn't say no. So there may have been people were trying to discredit the Bible. So the Bible talks about giants. If you can blame them all on just being mammoth bones, then you make the Bible seem like it isn't true. And that's really what was going on in the 1800s there. They were really fighting the veracity of the Bible. And, of course, that's the child of that now is modern day evolutionism, radical evolutionism. But Darwin couldn't have little bitty people, and he couldn't have real big people in his lineup. It wouldn't work.
Now, you just said earlier that that the giant skeletons have 6 fingers and 6 toes on them.
That's what a lot of the reports say. The Bible talks about that, and there are drawings of these guys that show the same thing, and you have to wonder, why would they have 6 fingers and 6 toes, and why 2 rows of front teeth? Or is everybody that has that bad? Well, no, because there are people today that are normal to have 6 toes and 6 fingers in some cases.
They're not 22 feet tall.
No, they're not 22 feet tall. Yeah. And we don't know that those, sometimes that's just, it may be that is a Siamese twin. You get Siamese twins, sometimes all you'll have is like, they'll have, 2 heads coming out of one body, or one leg coming out of a normal body. That's just 2 Siamese. That's twins that never separated enough. It could be that people with 6 toes and 6 fingers are just, they're an actual twin, and all they have of the other person is that one finger. But, I don't know. I'm sure that's been tested. But it doesn't mean those people are evil. I used to know a really sweet girl who had 6 toes. And, she was a very nice person. She was part Indian. So I don't know what that means, but I know the Indians used to, the Indians as we know them, like the Comanches, Cherokees, Apaches, and so on, a lot of those, at least their ancestors, had to deal with these giant people. And we don't know what color those giant men were in some cases, but they were always trouble with them. They were always having problems with them. So big people today generally tend to be nicer, more gentle. So why would the big ones in the past be so bad if being big made you bad? Because apparently being big doesn't. There's some of the reason they were so bad.
Well, before I answer that, I found second book of Samuel, chapter 21, verses 15 to 22, and it says, "And there was yet a battle in Gath, where was a man of great stature that had on every hand 6 fingers, and on every foot 6 toes,
right,
24 in number, and he also was born to the giant."
Right.
So there, that is right there.
Yeah.
Well, from what my understanding from reading about the wickedness is that these, according to the Bible, these giants are the offspring of the fallen angels, basically, that came down and found the women fair from Genesis 6:4, and basically had intercourse with human women, and this genetic aberration was giantism, basically. And because these fallen angels were basically wicked, that nature got passed on to their offspring. So that's kind of the biblical background of why the giants would be evil, because when Joshua and 12 other people from the tribe were sent by Moses to look at the promised land, they had to sneak into it basically, and they looked through some grapes or something like that, and they could see how big the giants were, and they were terrified, and they cut down some of the grapes, and it took 2 men to carry like a bunch of grapes back on a pole. Yeah. That's how heavy they were, and they told basically Moses that we don't want to move there, and 10 of them voted no, let's get out of here, and Joshua and somebody else was like, I think we can beat the giants, which sounds insane to me, because I would never like walk up and like smack Shaquille O'Neal in the face. So I can imagine if they're like 20 feet tall, how terrifying that must have been.
Oh, yeah. Well, they had the faith of God that God would fight their battles for them, and he did. But generally speaking, there really are 3 views of why there were giants. One is they're just naturally big. They're just naturally big people, and there's no spiritual thing involved. The other, of course, is that they were fathered by fallen angels, and that would, of course, be a really strange combination, that one could expect maybe giantism and evil would come from it, and these extra digits, but perhaps. The other thing is, I think a lot of the paleontologists and people, archaeologists that work on all this stuff, they realize there really are giant skeletons, and they're so big they can't account for them. So they have opted for one of the things they used to condemn and laugh at as having come here from outer space. They're aliens, you know. In a sense, a fallen angel, if he came from heaven, if he rebelled from God, fell to the earth, he'd be he'd be an alien, you know.
I agree.
But paleontologists can't have anything being spiritual. So, but they're leaning more towards aliens and outer space beings and space traveling crafts and all that stuff. And they used to poo-poo all that. But what choice have they got? If they say they're fathered by angels, then they can't have that because that agree with the Bible, or that would mean they were spiritual beings. If they're just really, really big people, they can't explain that because most big people today are ill. They can barely walk. You know, guys that are 8, 9 feet tall today can barely walk up the steps. They're in very bad shape. And that's not what you're looking at in those men of renown.
I mean, when you look at those skeletons, these bones that they uncover, I mean, most of these people that are giants today, you could see some type of deformity in their bone structure somewhere. So that should be apparent in the ancient bones that they're uncovering. But I don't think that they have. I mean, from what I've seen, the giant bones just seem like healthy bones.
Yeah, as far as I know, all the giant specimens are obviously they were called men of renown because they were great fighters. You know, these were athletes. The giants today, most like that guy in Russia and the gal over in Japan or China, they're some form of acromegalia or something like that, and they just have a lot of physical problems. Well, that's not what those guys in the Middle East were. They were big warriors, powerful warriors.
So how did mankind back then beat them? I mean, are we to believe that like the Lord just blessed them and that's in battle? I mean, I know that David picked out 5 smooth stones from a stream, and the first one sunk deep into Goliath's head, and that killed him. But it looked like they had after the flood, they were still around. They had up to like 400 plus years to build their numbers up. I mean, it seemed there's got to be more to the story. I mean, they totally disappeared.
Well, apparently David wiped out the last of the giants in his area, and that part of the world. There are apparently some men still 10, 12 feet tall over in Patagonia 500 years ago, and into the 1840s, men that were still 8 feet tall. But it could be that the giants, you know, the weather changed. Maybe the giants couldn't get enough food. Could be that the Israelites, of course, if God fought the battles for them, then we don't know how they prevailed against those really, really big men. But they did. It's possible they shot poisoned arrows into them, you know, and wouldn't have to have a very big arrow to go into a large leg that would kill the man eventually or whatever. We don't know. They may have ran up to them and hit them on the legs before they could get their mace out against the Israelites. We don't know. It didn't go into great detail on that. But Goliath, you know, he was what, 10 or 11 feet tall. And
he was 13 feet tall.
Yeah, he was, you know, certainly that tall or taller. Kind of depends on how you figure the cubit. You know, there's the royal cubit and the regular cubit, so either one may have been in play. But that stone, now he had thrown hundreds of thousands of rocks, so he knew what he could do. He knew how hard that thing would go, and he probably knew that if he hit somebody right between the eyes, that you're probably going to kill them, you know, because it pushes those bones up into the brain. And people speculate as to why did he have 5 stones, because Goliath had 4 brothers. Probably David was willing to take those all on too, and they could see that they were outmatched. And I mean, it's very possible that the Israelites shot all those guys in the eyes, blinded them. You know, hit them with slingshots, put their eyes out, shot them with arrows. Uh, we don't know.
Yeah, I guess you do what you have to do when you have to survive. So
Yeah,
you do anything. I just think of like guerrilla warfare because you're not going to go head to head. I mean, I'm gonna get you when it's dark in your sleep,
yeah, hmm yeah, and
call
they're,
into
you
your
know, but
ear or something.
those giants may have been alcoholics too. I mean, they may have all those grapes.
Yeah, you're right.
You know, they get drunk laying around, and somebody comes up and does them in. They don't know it. They just never wake up.
Maybe.
That's what happened to Santa Ana, you know, down here in Texas. Should have been drinking.
Mm. Well, there's actually a detailed description of giant cities in a book written by Dr. Josias Leslie Porter. It was published in London in 1865, and it's entitled "Giant Cities of Bashan and Syria's Holy Places." So I'm gonna get my hands on that. I'm actually gonna go to Amazon and order it and find out more. But he seems to be an authority on the culture, and I don't know where he gets his information, but I'm definitely gonna find out.
Josias Lester Porter.
Yep, Dr. Josias Leslie Porter.
Well, there's a structure over there that shows up in some of the antiquities books, and it almost looks like a hangar for a big, Zeppelin. It's
Hmm.
just enormous. It looks like it's about 50, 75 feet tall, and it's this giant Quonset type building made out of stone or mud or something, and one end of it's sort of falling apart. You look at that and you go, why in the world would a normal-sized people build anything like that? But if the men were 20 feet tall or so, it may have been one of their cities, one of their houses.
I just find all this fascinating. Well, you know what? I was reading the book of Enoch. My wife bought me the Sony Reader. It's like a Kindle for Christmas, and that was the first book that I downloaded, the Book of Enoch.
Hmm.
And it talks about the giants in the Book of Enoch, and it also says that the giants are coming back.
Right.
It says they're sleeping in like a mountain right now, like they're in stasis.
Hmm.
So I wasn't feeling really good about reading that part because they made it sound like they're going to get God's going to actually use the giants on Judgment Day as well, and send them. People are going to try to hide in their houses and on their rooftops, and I guess their houses are going to be like Intamin boxes to them. They're just going to open us up and eat us like a ding dong or a cupcake or something. But I was very concerned about that because I was like, how can they still be alive?
Yeah, I don't know that book, like some of those other books that they're suspect. I think Jesus quotes the Book of Enoch, but there are other books. The Book of Adam and Eve, Eden, or something like Lost Book of Eden, something like that. It is so depressing to read that I wouldn't recommend anybody but a seasoned, older, long-time Christian to even read it. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it is so depressing. And if it's made up by the Jesuits, like some people say, it's clever writing. If it's true, I mean, it was a sad situation. And some of those other books, like the book of Jasher, it doesn't read like it's made up. It doesn't read like a fake book. But boy, the stories in there, your eyes pop out and go, oh my gosh, is that really the way it is? Is that what really happened? So there's reasons why those books aren't included in the canon, but
Mm-hmm.
to just dismiss them as Jesuit writings, is a little bit hasty. There's stuff in there that does ring true, and you just wonder. But some of it's so bizarre that it's hard for us to comprehend. Even if it's made up, it's still hard to comprehend what they're trying to say.
Does the Catholic Church have giant skeletons in their possession? They seem to have been around for a long time, and probably like they're probably still one of the most powerful, influential institutions. Have you heard of them uncovering giant evidence and then suppressing it?
No, I haven't, but I know the Vatican vaults. They have a fabulous, no telling how many billions of dollars worth of art and artifacts and things like that in their storage that they've collected over the years. Maybe some of it was Roman, but they've got a lot of stuff. They've of course had the power everywhere they've been in power, like in Europe. If somebody found something, it's going to be kind of come to the attention of the local priest. So, and a lot of times people, the first thing they do is they call the sheriff or the teacher, the professor, or the priest in on something unusual. And since the Catholic Church had these buildings, there was some place to put stuff like that. And probably a lot of these giant skeletons were brought to the Catholic churches and then put in storage boxes, maybe displayed for a while, reburied, destroyed, the place burned down. We don't know. But the Catholic Church has stuff in their archives that probably blow your imagination. But as long as they've been over there, they certainly have had opportunity to acquire giant skeletons. But I've never read one Catholic writing that it even acknowledges them, which doesn't mean anything because I've read all the Catholic stuff, but I've never even heard it broached. So it will be interesting to know.
Well, you know, the Catholic Church is actually supporting Darwinism now. They're telling
Yeah.
they're not really saying that God created man. It was evolution.
Yeah.
And they're also telling their believers that that aliens are real and they are our space brothers.
I didn't know that. I mean, that's this whole alien thing. There's something going on there. Nobody quite knows for sure what it is, but the so-called messages that these things give out are generally anti-Christian. That Christ and Christians are the problem. So if somebody's just making it up, or if they're actual beings or demonic manifestations, then they're still generally anti-Christian. So they're not our brothers.
Yeah, I find it totally bizarre and suspicious that aliens, I say in quotes, are going to travel billions of light years or however they get here, and they're going to support the occult and deny Christ.
Yeah. Well, I think that apparently there are real strong, persistent stories of actually finding little green men, little gray men, and the human body has taken on a pretty wide variety of shapes and colors. You know, there's deformities and things like that of people that they're still human, but they look real different than what you'd ordinarily think people look like. So are these things some form of humanity that is deformed? We don't know. But is it some beings? Can some demon manifest itself in some sort of fleshly body? You know, and then when they kill it, could be studied. I don't know. But there is a persistent story that is true. You know, so a lot of times things that persist over a long period of time, you have to give them some kind of credence because hoaxes and myths either have to have a lot of power and money behind them, or they have to have a nucleus of truth to last for very long. So I don't know, but I think you're safe to assume they're in some sort of manifestation of demons. But I don't know. It's still a big mystery, and they've been going on a long time.
Well, I don't know. When you read about Abraham in like Genesis chapter 18 verses 1 to 8, it actually tells you that these angels can appear in human form, but they're not human, and they can still turn themselves into spirit, and they can still travel faster than the speed of light, because Abraham had them in his tent, and he actually fed them. They eat, and that happened with Abraham. And then when you read when they went to Lot, when they stayed with Lot, Apparently, angels are human looking. They can be mistaken for humans, and they're extremely attractive as well. And so they do seem to be able to transition to physical and then to spirit. So they're not like us per se.
Right.
And there was a gentleman by the name of Roger Morneau. It's Morneau. You can Google him, and he used to be an occult practitioner, and he said, or he claims that he's actually seen the fallen angels, and he's like, they're beautiful. He's like, they're just as beautiful as they were before they fell, and they just sell people on the fact that it was just a major